My fellow Americans, did you hold a minimum wage job in the 1960s or 1970s? If so, then your federal government tried to ensure you were paid enough to support yourself, a spouse, and a kid, and still be right at or even above the poverty level for a family of three. Think of it. Support a family on a minimum wage job and still be above the poverty level. Now that's family values. But that value, that family value of setting the minimum wage high enough so people could support themselves, a spouse, and a kid on a minimum wage job, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, and still be at or even above the poverty level for a family of three, that family value was gone by the mid-1980s. It went away under President Ronald Reagan. So we need to make America's minimum wage great again. By 1989, when Reagan left office, when I had my first minimum wage job at age 16, the minimum wage was exactly the same as it had been in 1981 when Reagan took office, and was barely enough to keep me, no spouse, no kid, just me, at wages that were just barely above the poverty level for a single person. Back then, I was in high school. It was a summer job. Now, I was and I am fortunate and privileged in all kinds of ways, including knowing that at any time I could quit. At the end of that summer, 1989, I did quit. And with the support of my parents, I could continue on in studying for a better future for myself in high school and in college. So I did. But that 1989 crisis, where a full-time worker at minimum wages was just barely above the poverty level, that crisis was enough to prompt a minimum wage increase in 1990 under then-President George H.W. Bush. But then, when George W. Bush was president, that crisis was even worse in 2006. And that crisis is threatening to happen again soon. So let's restore people's ability to support themselves, a spouse and a kid. Let's value the family by increasing the federal minimum wage so that a single person working full-time at minimum wages can afford to support a spouse and a kid too, and still be at or above the poverty level for a family of three. Family values, just like it was, just like some of you had it back in the 1960s and 1970s. But here in North Carolina, you work a minimum wage job and you, just by yourself, well, your income is so low that you are eligible for energy assistance, Medicaid, and food stamps. Depending on your situation, say you're taking care of a kid, you might even get cash assistance. And all that is paid for by taxes. So that means we taxpayers are subsidizing companies that pay minimum wage jobs and simultaneously stressing out minimum wage workers who work those jobs. Indeed, when a full-time working person's only form of hope for getting out of their economic situation legally is to win the lottery, that's a big problem for our civilization and for its future. Other states are starting to offer hope, though, because even if our federal elected officials haven't been up to the task of doing it nationally, over 24 states have already raised their minimum wages above the federal level, which, yes, hasn't changed since 2009. I mean, really, if you were a minimum wage worker back in the 1960s or 1970s, your understanding or experience of a minimum wage job is not my understanding or experience of a minimum wage job. Indeed, I honestly can't imagine how secure you must have felt, knowing that even a minimum wage job, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, would have allowed you to support not only yourself, but a spouse and a kid, and still be above the poverty level for your family of three. Or to save up enough for yourself to get some more training, or even afford to go to college on a minimum wage job. So let's all call our elected officials at the state and federal level to make America's minimum wage great again, and to keep it that way, for our citizens, for our civilization, and for its future. I'm Robert Frederick. May peace be with you.